Morning, all. All right, so we're going to talk about the 1923-1924 season. Only 100 years behind where the calendar currently resides, 2024. So for the Ottawa Senators, they finished first in the league again. They're 16-8, 74 goals scored, 54 goals against, 32 points. And the Senators are up there despite their captain being forced to retire due to a throat ailment. Eddie Girard, a longtime Montreal Canadian. I'm sure they missed him, but they were able to finish first in the league that year. And they moved into an 11,000-seat Ottawa auditorium. So, moving into a bigger building, more fans in attendance, setting attendance records for the Sens. Montreal finishes second at a record of 13-11, 59 goals scored, 48 goals against, 26 points. The 48 goals against, meaning 2 goals per game being allowed by Montreal. The defense was getting a little more stingy. And Ottawa only allowing 54. They were right there with Montreal in terms of, well, we don't have a Jennings Trophy yet, but we will. And Montreal would have won it that year. Toronto, 10-14 was their record. They scored 59 goals, which is in line with Montreal's. But the goals against, they allowed 85. So they finished with 20 points. They allowed 85 goals. The defense, the goaltending letting them down that year. Hamilton finishes 9-15. Their goal differential much better than Toronto's. 63 goals scored, 63 goals against. They finished with 18 points, bottom of the league. But again, they did get better. So I mentioned Girard was forced to retire. Also, we get our first trophy in the NHL that year. Dr. David Hart donates a trophy to the National Hockey League, just the Hart Trophy, and the NHL decides we're going to give this to the MVP of the league. And Dr. David Hart was actually the father of the Habs coach and manager, Cecil Hart. So it's a Montreal trophy. September 30th of 1923, Montreal signs Howie Morenz, and Morenz would evolve and become basically the biggest draw the NHL had to that point. Morenz becomes a major star in the National Hockey League. February 20th of 1924. An interesting story here in that the Senators are supposed to play Montreal. So the fans arrived. They waited 2 hours before the game was called. It would be played the following night. The Senators did not arrive because their train was stuck in the snow, still in Ontario, so they'd have to play the next night against Montreal. February 9th of 1924, the league has their meeting, and they do introduce the Hart Trophy. They decide this is going to go to the league's MVP. They also discussed expansion to the U.S., and that is coming before the decade's done. We'll start seeing other original 6 teams on the board at that point. Boston, Detroit, Chicago, all get added over the coming years. And, of course, we're going to see a lot of financial hardship over those coming years as well. The Sens also go to the league, and they claim that Sprague Cleghorn is intentionally injuring his opponents and pointing out an incident with Cy Denneny and going, look, he is intentionally injuring players. The league decides, well, we don't see anything here saying that he's intentionally injuring players. And then in the next game between Montreal and Ottawa, Sprague Cleghorn drives Lionel Hitchman headfirst into the boards and gets suspended for a game. So Ottawa tried to tell them, look, this guy's hurting our players. The league's like, but are they though? I mean, is he though? And then Sprague went out and injured. I'm guessing it was for tattling. I don't know. But it's not the first time I've mentioned Sprague Cleghorn injuring Ottawa Senators. In fact, I did a bit of a double take to make sure, is this the same season I already covered? Nope, we've talked about this before. So apparently something about the Ottawa Senators sweaters just bothers Sprague Cleghorn or something. He's a very talented player. He was able to put up a lot of points in his career, but he also generated plenty of controversy during that time. This also marked the final year for the PCHA. They would go out of business. Of course, the surviving teams go to the WCHL, but it does not stick around either. So, the NHL final, it's still the 2-game combined goals final. Montreal wins both games, so the combined goals doesn't really matter. They win over Ottawa 1-0 in the first game and 4-2 in the second game. So the combined score is 5-2 for Montreal to win that series, upset Ottawa, and go on to the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, the Montreal Canadiens didn't feel like this was a fair setup, that to win the Stanley Cup, they had to go through first the PCHA winner and then the WCHL winner. They felt that the PCHA and WCHL teams should play against one another, and then the winner plays against Montreal. But those who were in charge of the Stanley Cup said, nope, you got to play against both. So for Montreal to win the Stanley Cup, they had to go through 2 different teams to do it. And so it starts with them playing against Vancouver in a best 2 out of 3, and they win both. 3-2 in game 1 and 2-1 in game 2. So the Vancouver Maroons, who are the Vancouver Millionaires under a rebrand, not having a whole lot more success in the Stanley Cup final than the Millionaires had. And then Montreal plays against Calgary from the WCHL and has a much easier time with Calgary. 6-1 in game 1 and 3-0 in game 2. So they did not lose a game in the entire playoffs. They ended up winning both in the NHL playoffs and then all 4 in the Stanley Cup Finals. So pretty impressive run. So the leading scorer that year is Cy Denny, and it is a really low number where he ends up finishing to win everything. He's the #1 goal scorer with 22. That's in 22 games. I assume Sprague Cleghorn gave him the other 2 games off with an injury. 2 assists and 24 points. So this is the lowest point total for anybody who's led the league in NHL history. And I don't think we'll ever see a 24-point producer lead the league. I think you'd need like a 10-game season, 15-game season to hope to have somebody finish with less than 24 points that leads the league in scoring. Billy Boucher for the Montreal Canadiens, 23 games, 16 goals, 7 assists, 23 points. Billy Birch for Hamilton, 24 games, 16 goals, 6 assists, 22 points for him. Georges Boucher for Ottawa, 21 games, 13 goals, 9 assists, 22 points. Babe Dye for Toronto, 19 games, 17 goals, 4 assists, 21 points. Aurel Joliat for Montreal, 24 games, 15 goals, 6 assists, 21 points. Jack Adams for Toronto, again, the guy that they named the trophy after that's handed out to the best coach in the league. 22 games, 13 goals, 6 assists, 19 points. For King Clancy, 24 games with Ottawa, 8 goals, 10 assists, 18 points. Didn't see anything about him playing all 6 positions in any of the games that season. Reg Noble for Toronto, 24 games, 12 goals, 5 assists, 17 points. And Frank Nybor of Ottawa plays 20 games, 11 goals, 6 assists, 17 points. Interestingly enough, Nybor is named the first ever Hart Trophy winner. So the Ottawa Senators player ends up being the Hart Trophy winner, even though he's 10th in the league in scoring. And when I was putting this board together, I thought, man, if the guy who's 10th in league scoring ended up being your Hart Trophy winner now, I think some people would be unhappy, is the way I'll put it. They'd be unhappy that it wasn't one of the top few guys. Clint Benedict continues an amazing run in net. 15-7 record, 1.99 goals against. Just bested a little bit by Georges Vezina, who goes 13-11, 1.97 goals against for Vezina. John Ross Roach for Toronto, 10-13 with a 3.48 goals against. Jake Forbes continues his good run with Hamilton. 9-15 record, 2.75 goals against average. So for Forbes, I mean, he's not getting the wins he did when he was in Toronto, but I'm sure he was getting paid better. At least I think he was getting paid better. And yeah, things are pretty steady in the National Hockey League at this point. But again, expansion's on the horizon. Of course, the depression's really going to kick in soon as well. And it's going to hurt some teams and cause some movement. But at any rate, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.